A nation's children are that nation's future. To neglect a country's children is to risk that country's future. For more than 20 years, the Children's Defense Fund has been our country's foremost advocate for our young and for their futures. As Terrence Smith tells us, it takes a leader with a passion for children to have waged that fight for so long.
On their first night of their first visit to Washington since the election, the first couple-elect made it a point to attend the annual dinner of the Children's Defense Fund. Little surprise, perhaps, since Hillary Clinton is a former chairman and current board member.
We owe our children more than we have been giving to them. And we need to begin paying that to them in the ways that count for children, with love and attention, the right mixture.
It was a great moment. We're all in total wonder, having lived in the wilderness for so long, to have the spotlight on our issues, on children who are beating the odds, and to have, you know, the President-elect and the First Lady come to affirm the importance of children and of children who are beating the odds, was just wonderful.
For Marian Wright Edelman, the organization's founder and president, the high-level attention was a fitting culmination of more than 20 years of advocacy on behalf of the people she describes as the poorest Americans.
So inspiring.
Thank you. Many people think that the elderly are the poorest group of Americans, and in fact, you know, that's not true. 1 in 4 of our preschoolers is poor. 1 in 5 of all children.
Despite the progress that has been made over the last 20 years, the latest statistics compiled by the Defense Fund on the plight of children in America remain frightening. Every 35 seconds, an infant is born into poverty. Every 64 seconds, a baby is born to a teenaged mother. Every night, 100,000 children go to sleep without homes. Every year, nearly 500,000 children drop out of school.
You know, I fear for my country sometimes. You know, the Bible says that to those to whom much is given, much is expected. And I think that it is clearly time for us to face up to our failure to invest in our children. I think it's going to kill us. I mean, it's going to kill us morally, and it's going to kill us economically if we don't begin to get the next generation of workers, you know, healthy today and ready for school today.
Marian is a natural leader. It's her commitment, her convictions, her deeply, deeply felt views about what's happened or what's not happened to children and families in this country.
I'm not quite sure what's going on here.
Senator Christopher Dodd of Connecticut, a leading advocate for children in Congress, worked with Marian Wright Edelman for 5 years to enact child care legislation.
If I had to pick someone to be in a foxhole with in a legislative battle, Marian would be on the top of my list. She takes no prisoners. She has presence, and she's able to bring together a very large group of people under a very large tent, and very few people can do that over an extended period of time. They may do it for a year, they may do it on a particular issue. Marian has done it now for several decades.
You must preserve the right of the people to participate, because only through that kind of motivation and self-help are you going to get any kind of lasting change. Else the
a quarter century ago, a poised 28-year-old Marian Wright was arguing on behalf of poor families before a Senate committee. The daughter of a South Carolina minister, she had graduated from Yale Law School and plunged into civil rights work in the Mississippi Delta.
That was a very courageous move. I think there were only 3 black lawyers in the whole state at that time. This was when people were getting killed regularly.
Former Atlanta Mayor Andrew Young.
Well, I think what she understood was that people in Mississippi couldn't solve the problem alone, that this was one problem that required government intervention. And I think programs like the Women, Infants, and Children's program would have been wiped off the books if it hadn't been for Marian fighting to keep those programs alive in Washington.
Senator, this is Mrs. Taylor. Senator Kennedy.
Nice to see you.
It was during this period that Marian Wright introduced the facts of poverty in rural Mississippi to the American public through one of the legendary figures of the 1960s, Robert Kennedy. She took Kennedy into some of the dirt-poor homes in the Mississippi Delta. Kennedy's aide on that trip was a young lawyer, Peter Edelman.
We were married a year later after Robert Kennedy died, July 1968.
That's great. You seem good this
Today, the Edelmans have 3 sons and, despite their busy schedule, a family that comes first.
Well, she's a wonderful wife and a wonderful mother, and she's a person who's very private, in fact, really wants to come home and, as she always says, get grounded.
You know, I grew up in a very religious family, and the reason I do what I do, I like to think, is because of that spiritual grounding. And you can get so busy, and you can get so caught up in things in Washington, and so caught up in meetings, and caught up in legislation, or caught up in your meetings and speeches, that you need to step back. And so that I try to stay centered, and sometimes it's very hard if you're busy.
Wonderful to hear you speak. You want our mailing list? You're going to give that to Teresa?
An indefatigable campaigner for her cause, Marian Wright Edelman averages 50 major speeches and innumerable appearances a year.
I'm honored to be here with the mother of the Civil Rights Movement, Rosa Parks.
She addressed the National Association of Black Journalists in Detroit in August.
And the deepest crisis of values at the moment in America is our failure as the richest nation on earth to make sure that our children don't go hungry, don't go homeless, don't go without education. And I don't for a moment believe that we can't take care of our kids, and that, for me, is the real test of family values.
Marian Wright Edelman has been making these points for years, but now, with the new administration about to take power, she intends to push harder than ever for the organization's ambitious agenda. More funding for food and nutrition, for child welfare and immunization, and perhaps most important, full funding for Head Start.
Everybody says they are for Head Start. The business community say they are for Head Start. President Bush says he was for Head Start, Republicans and Democrats alike. And this is the program around which we seem to have a consensus, so let's just do it. We cannot afford any longer to have only 1/3 of the eligible children served by this program. So here is the chance to put into place a comprehensive early childhood development program with great parental involvement and parental support that can begin to get every one of our children ready for school.
And what will all this cost? The Children's Defense Fund is calling for a $10 billion increase in funding for an expanded Head Start program over the next 5 years.
The issue is not how can we afford to give our children health care or preventive care. How can we afford to give our children Head Start? How in the world can we afford not to do it when we see the cost of welfare, of prison costs, of crime, of the alienation and the failure to get people able to be productive, contributing citizens? You know, our choice is very clear.
I really like the beginning of your book, the part your son wrote.
That's the best part of the book.
I really like it.
Given her reputation and successful track record on Capitol Hill, it is no surprise that Marian Wright Edelman is frequently mentioned as a possible cabinet secretary in the new administration. Is that something you'd want to do?
No, not at all. Again, that's not who I am. And I'm not temperamentally, I think, suited for that. I also know that there are many, many people who can do that well. I think that I was put on this earth to stay focused completely on children who need an outside voice that's there just for them. And besides, we've invested 20 years in this, and I think that we're going to begin to succeed, and I want to be out there to make children good politics.
The Bronx